My name is Bethany Maldonado. I'm 27, living in a quiet suburb outside Denver, Colorado. I work as a freelance interior designer, mostly from my small but cozy apartment. I thought family meant love and trust until that Friday morning. I came home to find moving trucks lined up outside my childhood house, the one my grandmother left entirely to me in her will. My parents stood on the porch, casually giving orders to the movers as if everything belonged to them. "It's better this way, Bate," my mother said, holding a stack of papers I'd never seen before. "We sold the house yesterday. You'll understand one day." I felt my chest tight. They sold my inheritance without telling me. How far would they go to erase me from my own family? I drove down the familiar street lined with maple trees, their orange leaves swirling in the wind. My grandmother's house sat at the end, a two-story Victorian with a faded blue porch and a white swing that creaked when the breeze hit. That house had always felt like a living thing, breathing with memories. It was the place where I spent every summer, learned to bake pies, and hid from thunderstorms in Grandma's arms. But that morning, something was wrong. Two moving trucks were parked in front of the house. The porch was crowded with strangers carrying boxes. My heart dropped. I slammed the car door and rushed toward the gate. "Hey!" I called out to a man hauling a chandelier wrapped in bubble wrap. "What are you doing?" He didn't even look at me. "Moving orders, ma'am. Living room stuff goes first." My feet felt heavy as I stepped onto the porch, and there they were, my parents, standing like landlords. My father barked directions to the movers, clipboard in hand. My mother held a thick folder of papers, flipping through them like some executive closing a deal. "Mom, Dad, what the hell is going on?" My voice cracked. They both turned to me, startled at first, then quickly composed themselves. My mother's expression softened in that practiced, condescending way she used when I was a kid who didn't understand adult things. "It's better this way, Bate," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We sold the house yesterday. You'll understand one day." I froze. Her words hit like a slap. "What do you mean you sold it? This house, Grandma left it to me." Dad sighed loudly, like he was tired of explaining something obvious. "Bethany, we discussed this as a family. You were exactly in a position to handle the responsibilities. The upkeep, the taxes, come on, it's unrealistic." I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. "We discussed this? When? Because I must have missed that family meeting." They avoided my eyes. Behind them, a mover accidentally knocked over Grandma's antique lamp. It shattered against the floor. I flinched as if a piece of me broke too. I marched toward my mother and snatched the folder from her hands. "What are those papers?" She grabbed it back quickly. "Bate, don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder for who? You're selling my inheritance behind my back." "Enough," Dad snapped. "This decision is final." I looked between them, my pulse hammering. "You can't just sell it. It's not yours to sell." My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was doing me a favor. "You'll get a share of the money. Eventually. We're doing this to help you." "Help me?" I said, my throat tightening. "By erasing everything Grandma left for me?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned back to the movers. "Make sure the kitchen set goes into truck 1. I stood there, surrounded by strangers dismantling my childhood. The smell of old cedar and cinnamon, the smell of Grandma's house, mixed with the sharp scent of packing tape. My hands trembled. I ran upstairs, 2 steps at a time, ignoring their calls. In Grandma's room, the curtains were half torn down. The closet doors were open, empty hangers swaying. On the vanity sat the embroidered handkerchief with my initials, BM, folded neatly. I grabbed it like it was a lifeline. Tears welled up, but anger burned hotter. This wasn't just a house. This was my future, my security, my last connection to the woman who raised me more than my own parents ever did. I stormed back down. "I'm calling Mr. Harlow," I said. He was Grandma's lawyer, the one who handled the will. "He'll clear this up." My dad laughed under his breath. "Go ahead." I pulled out my phone right there on the porch. My fingers shook as I dialed. Mr. Harlow picked up on the second ring. "Bethany, it's been a while. Did you know they sold the house?" I blurted out. Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "Sold the house? That's impossible. The deed is in your name. No one can sell it without your signature." "Well, they did," I whispered. "I'll pull the records right now," he said, voice clipped. "Stay where you are, don't sign anything." I hung up and looked at my parents. They were whispering to each other now, their confident posture cracking just a bit. "What did he say?" Dad asked. "You'll find out soon enough," I replied. Their faces hardened. My mother sighed dramatically. "Bate, you're being emotional. We made a practical decision. You should be grateful." Grateful. The word echoed like poison in my chest. I stepped back, staring at the house, at the trucks, at the strangers dismantling everything I thought was safe. For the first time, I saw my parents not as caretakers but as opponents, People capable of betrayal so cold, it didn't even shake them. I didn't know how, but I made myself a silent promise that morning. I would find out what they did, and I would take everything back. I spent the rest of that morning pacing outside the house, my heart racing as Mr. Harlow called me back. His voice was grave. "Bethany, I checked the county records. A sale was filed 2 days ago under your name. There's a signature on it that's supposed to be yours." My stomach turned cold, but I never signed anything. "I know," he said firmly. "I've seen your signature on dozens of documents over the years. This one is off. It's a forgery. Listen to me carefully. Don't let them pressure you into leaving the property. I'll file a temporary injunction this afternoon." I pressed my back against the porch railing, trying to breathe. Across the yard, Dad was talking to the movers like nothing was wrong. Mom stood by the door, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. "Thanks, Mr. Harlow," I managed. "Please hurry." "I will, and Bethany," he added, "keep your eyes open. Something about this isn't just sloppy, it's calculated." I hung up. My fingers were slick with sweat. My parents were smiling at the neighbors, waving like a perfectly normal couple. I wanted to scream. Inside, the movers had made significant progress. Grandma's framed cross-stitch that said "Home is where love grows" was lying face down on the floor. A lifetime of memories reduced to inventory. I followed Mom into the kitchen. She was on the phone with someone, speaking in a low, cheerful tone. When she noticed me, she ended the call abruptly. "We need to talk," I said. She sighed. "Bethany, we've already explained everything." "No," I cut her off. "You explained nothing. You forged my signature." Her eyes flashed just for a second before she forced a smile. "That's a very serious accusation, sweetheart. You really should calm down." "Stop calling me sweetheart," I snapped. "This isn't some teenage tantrum, this is fraud." She leaned against the counter, completely unfazed. "You've always been dramatic. This is why we couldn't trust you with the house. You don't think logically." I stared at her. "Logically? You sold a property that wasn't yours. You're lucky I haven't called the police yet." She tilted her head. "You wouldn't." I held her gaze. "Try me." She broke eye contact first, pretending to rearrange some papers on the counter. "Bethany, life is expensive. Your father and I are retiring soon. Lucas has responsibilities. We needed the money more than you needed that creaky old house." Lucas, of course. My brother had a way of showing up when trouble involved money. "Where is he?" I asked. She shrugged. "Busy." I stepped closer. "Mom, listen to yourself. This house was mine. Grandma trusted me, not you. You went behind my back." "She trusted us," she shot back. "She trusted the family, not one person playing house in Denver." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. For a moment, I saw the girl I used to be, desperate for her approval, trying to keep the peace. But that girl was gone. "I'm not leaving," I said quietly. "Not until this is over." Mom's expression darkened. "You don't get a choice." I left the kitchen before I could say something I'd regret. Upstairs, I closed the door to Grandma's bedroom and sat on the floor. The movers' footsteps echoed through the house like an army of strangers. I pressed the embroidered handkerchief against my chest, trying to stop shaking. Then I remembered the old cedar wardrobe in the corner. Grandma had always told me, some things aren't meant for everyone to find, Bate, only for the right moment. I opened it. Most of her clothes were gone, but at the back, behind a loose wooden panel, I found a small tin box. Inside was a USB drive, wrapped in the same floral handkerchief Grandma used to carry in church. My breath caught. She left something for me. I slipped it into my pocket and left quietly, careful not to draw attention. My parents were too busy micromanaging the movers to notice. Back at my apartment, I locked the door behind me like the house itself might follow. I set the USB on my desk, staring at it. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a long time before I finally plugged it in. The screen loaded a folder titled simply, "For Bate." Inside were scanned copies of legal documents, deeds, letters, and something that looked like handwritten notes from Grandma. And then, at the bottom, an audio file named "Don't Trust Them." I clicked it. Grandma's frail but clear voice filled the room. "Bethany, if you're hearing this, it means what I feared has happened. Your parents and Luca's, they've been talking for years. They think you're too trusting. Don't sign anything. And don't let them push you out. Everything I left is legally yours. Protect it. Protect yourself." I covered my mouth. I'd suspected betrayal, but hearing Grandma say it out loud made it real in a way nothing else could. I replayed the message 3 times, memorizing every word. A mix of grief and fury welled inside me. Grandma had seen this coming, and she'd tried to warn me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside my apartment made me sit up. My phone buzzed with texts from Mom. "Come back tomorrow so we can talk this through like adults. You're overreacting. We love you, Bate." Love, Funny how easily they used that word while erasing me from my own family. I typed one reply, "Don't sell another thing, I know everything." Then I turned my phone face down. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds, but my mind was still tangled in Grandma's voice from the night before. "Don't trust them, protect yourself." It wasn't just a warning, it was a mission. I made coffee, sat down at my small kitchen table, and started listing out what I knew. Years of being an interior designer taught me to solve problems by breaking them down piece by piece. Now I was applying that same skill to my own family. The house was sold without my consent. My signature was forged. Grandma had anticipated betrayal. Lucas and my parents had been scheming for years. I stared at the list until the letters blurred. For the first time, it hit me, this wasn't some misunderstanding that could be fixed with a family talk. This was a planned betrayal. I called Mr. Harlow again. He picked up immediately. "I filed the injunction last night," he said. "The sale is temporarily frozen. If the buyer tries to move forward, they'll be in violation of court order." "Thank you," I breathed. "What happens next?" "We'll need proof of the forgery. I'm already subpoenaing the title company for the original documents. Once we have that, this entire sale can be declared void. But Bethany," his voice softened, "you need to prepare yourself. Your parents will fight this." "I know," I whispered. "They already started." When I hung up, I opened Grandma's documents again. Buried beneath letters and deeds was something I hadn't noticed before, a scanned ledger with handwritten notes. Dates, names, amounts, transfers. Some of them went back more than a decade. And then a name I didn't expect. Lucas Maldonado LLC. I frowned. Lucas never had a company. At least not one he talked about. I Googled it. Sure enough, a shell company registered in Nevada 6 years ago. The registered address was a UPS store. "Oh my God," I muttered. Lucas wasn't just freeloading. He was laundering family assets through fake companies, and my parents were either complicit or willfully blind. I printed everything out, slid the papers into a folder, and tucked it into my bag. If I was going to war, I needed ammunition. By noon, I drove back to the house. The trucks were gone, but the living room was stripped bare. It looked like a hollow shell of my childhood, walls echoing, floors scuffed where furniture once sat. My parents were sitting at the dining table, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. Mom was the first to notice me. "You're back," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I never left," I replied. Dad folded his arms. "You should stop making this difficult." "Funny," I said, pulling out the folder. "I was about to say the same to you." I laid the papers on the table, copies of the forged deed, the injunction notice from the court, and Grandma's scanned documents. Mom's face drained of color when she saw the legal seal. "What is this?" Dad barked. "Proof," I said. "You forged my signature, the sale's frozen, and I know about Lucas's company." They exchanged a quick glance, too quick. That tiny flicker was confirmation enough. "You don't know what you're talking about," Mom said, her voice shaky but defiant. "Really? Because Mr. Harlow seems to think a judge will be very interested in this." Dad slammed his palm on the table, making the papers jump. "You think you can take us to court? We're your parents." I met his stare without flinching. "Exactly, and you should have remembered that before betraying me." For a brief moment, silence filled the room, the kind that presses against your skin. Then Mom tried a different tactic, softness. She reached for my hand. "Bait, honey, we didn't mean to hurt you. Things have been complicated. Lucas is in trouble, we had to act fast." "So you stole from me?" My voice cracked. "Do you even hear yourselves?" "It's family," Dad insisted. "Family looks out for each other." I laughed bitterly. "Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't sell your house behind your back." Their faces hardened again. The mask had slipped. The real battle lines were drawn. As I turned to leave, Mom said quietly, "You're making a mistake." I paused at the doorway. "No, I'm finally fixing yours." Outside, I sat in my car and let the adrenaline crash. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. But beneath the fear was something new: clarity. For once, I wasn't their naive little girl. I was the rightful heir, and I had the law and Grandma on my side. That night, back in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about the ledger. If Lucas had been siphoning money for years, this wasn't just about the house. It was bigger and deeper. I decided to dig. I stayed up past midnight, combing through state registries, business filings, property records. Piece by piece, I began to see the outline of something rotten. Shell companies, joint accounts, transfers under my name I never authorized. By 2 a.m., I had an entire corkboard full of printouts and notes. It looked like something out of a detective movie, but this was my life, my family. And then a thought hit me so hard it made me sit back in my chair. If they were willing to forge my signature once, what else had they signed in my name? The house, the company, the inheritance. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a war they didn't know they'd already lost, because Grandma had trusted me to be the one person who wouldn't look away. And I wasn't going to. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind was buzzing like a switchboard, every thought connecting to another lead, another question, another betrayal I hadn't yet uncovered. By morning, I'd already made 3 lists, one for legal steps, one for investigative leads, and one simply titled Family Lies. At the top of that last list was Lucas. He'd always been the golden boy, the charming, confident older brother who could talk his way out of anything. While I was getting scholarships and working 2 jobs in college, Lucas was burning through Dad's credit cards and calling it networking. Mom defended him endlessly. Dad pretended not to see. Grandma, she saw everything, but she loved him too much to confront him head-on. Now it seemed Lucas hadn't just coasted through life. He'd built a quiet empire out of our family's assets. I spent the morning combing through more public filings. Lucas Maldonado LLC had tentacles everywhere: minor property deeds, vehicle leases, investment transfers, all modest on their own, but together they formed a web. There were at least 7 connected entities, some under variations of his name, others under initials that traced back to my parents. I took screenshots, saved PDFs, labeled everything meticulously. Every time I found a new connection, a mix of adrenaline and nausea hit me. This was real. This wasn't paranoia. Around noon, Mr. Harlow called. "Bethany, I received copies of the sale documents," he said. "They definitely forged your signature. We've filed for a preliminary hearing next week. I'll need you to be present." "I'll be there," I said without hesitation. "And Bethany, this could get ugly. Your parents might hire their own legal team. Lucas might testify. Be ready for them to paint you as unstable." I laughed bitterly. "They've been doing that my whole life. I'm ready." After hanging up, I decided to play it smart. Going nuclear too early would give them time to regroup. I needed more than just proof of one forged signature. I needed to unravel their entire scheme piece by piece. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Lucas. He picked up on the 3rd ring, his voice smooth and slightly annoyed. "Bait, what now?" "I want to talk," I said evenly. "Face to face," he chuckled. "About the house, don't be dramatic." "Not on the phone," I insisted. "Meet me at the bar on 5th, tonight." There was a pause, then, "Fine, but I'm not buying your drink." The bar on 5th was dim, lined with dark wood and old whiskey barrels. It smelled like cheap beer and fried food, Lucas's natural habitat. He was already there when I arrived, wearing his usual smug grin and a leather jacket that probably cost more than his car insurance. Well, the prodigal sister returns," he said, raising his glass. "Cut the crap, Lucas," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "We both know what this is about. Enlighten me. The house, the forged documents, the LLCs." The smirk faltered for a split second. Then he leaned back, all fake ease. "Wow, you've been busy." "Busy cleaning up your mess," I shot back. "How long have you been using fake companies to funnel money?" He didn't answer immediately. He swirled his drink, studying me. "You always were the little detective, huh? Grandma's favorite." "That's not an answer," he sighed dramatically. "Look, Bate, things got complicated. I made some bad investments, but I'm fixing it." "By stealing from me?" "Don't be so self-righteous," he snapped suddenly. "Mom and Dad agreed. It's family money. We're just reallocating." "Family money that Grandma left to me," I said, my voice low and sharp, "because she didn't trust any of you with it." He flinched, just barely, but enough. "I have recordings," I added. "Emails, financial records. The injunction is already filed. You're in deep, Lucas." His jaw tightened. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm telling you the truth. You're not untouchable anymore." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You don't understand. This goes beyond the house. There are people involved who won't like this kind of attention. You should back off." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something behind his eyes, not arrogance, but fear. "What people?" I pressed. He stood abruptly, throwing some cash on the table. "Drop it, Bethany, for your own good." He left without looking back. I sat there long after he was gone, heart pounding. Lucas had slipped. He'd hinted at something bigger, maybe debts, maybe shady partners. Either way, I just stepped into a deeper layer of this mess. Back home, I wrote everything down while it was fresh. Then I opened Grandma's audio file again, replaying her words. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known it wasn't just about family squabbles. The next day, I made my first official legal move. I opened a separate bank account, froze my credit, and flagged any accounts linked to my name. Then I met with Mr. Harlow to sign affidavits confirming the forgery. We reviewed our preliminary strategy, challenged the house sale as fraudulent, file a civil claim for damages tied to the forged documents, begin financial discovery to trace the money through Lucas's companies. He looked at me over his glasses. This won't just be a legal battle, it'll be personal. Are you sure you're ready for that? I nodded. They've been fighting dirty for years. It's about time I joined the ring. That night, I drove by the house again. A sold sign was still planted in the yard, though the sale was frozen. The porch light was on. Through the window, I saw Mom sitting alone at the table, staring at her phone. For a brief second, guilt punched me in the gut. She looked small, fragile. But then I remembered her saying, "You'll understand one day." No, she wasn't fragile. She was calculating. Before driving away, I whispered to the empty street, "Game on." The next morning, my inbox pinged with an unexpected email from someone named Evelyn Rodriguez at a private title research firm. "Ms. Maldonado, I came across your case through county filings. I believe I have information about the buyer of your grandmother's property that may be of interest. Would you be willing to meet confidentially?" My pulse quickened. A stranger reaching out about the buyer? That could mean one of two things, either a scam or a thread that could unravel the whole sweater. I replied, "Yes. When and where?" Her answer came quickly. "Tomorrow, noon, Bluebird Cafe downtown, booth 4. I sat back, staring at the email. Something told me this wasn't just about Lucas anymore. This was about who they sold the house to and why. The next day, I arrived at Bluebird Cafe 10 minutes early. It was one of those quiet, sunlit places downtown where retirees read newspapers and college students typed furiously on laptops. I chose a corner booth with a view of the door. My nerves hummed beneath the surface, that electric buzz before something shifts. At exactly noon, a woman walked in. Mid-30s, tailored blazer, neat bun, she looked more like a corporate lawyer than someone who'd accidentally found my case. She scanned the room once, then approached me with a small, cautious smile. "Bethany Maldonado?" she asked. "That's me." "I'm Evelyn Rodriguez," she said, sliding into the booth. "Thank you for meeting me." "Your email was intriguing," I admitted. She nodded, setting a leather folder on the table. "I work for a private title research firm. We specialize in uncovering irregularities in property transfers, fraud, shell buyers, forged documents. Your case hit our radar because of the speed of the sale and some anomalies with the buyer." I leaned forward. "Anomalies?" Evelyn opened her folder, revealing printed records. "The buyer of your grandmother's house is listed as Henderson Development Group, a Delaware-based corporation. It was formed less than 3 months ago. No physical office, no website, no real activity, just one transaction, your house." My stomach tightened. "So, a shell company." "Most likely," she said. "And here, where it gets interesting, the company's registered agent is the same firm that Lucas used to register Lucas Maldonado LLC." I sat back, stunned. "You're saying Lucas is connected to the buyer?" She raised a brow. "I'm saying the odds are very high." I swallowed. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a setup. Lucas hadn't just pushed my parents to sell the house for his debts. He'd essentially sold it to himself, hiding behind a corporate front. "Why would he go through so much trouble?" I asked. Evelyn tapped her pen. "Probably to leverage the property for loans, or to transfer assets in a way that keeps them out of your legal reach. If you hadn't filed the injunction, they might have mortgaged or flipped the property before you even noticed." I exhaled shakily. "Jesus." She slid a business card across the table. "If you want, my firm can trace the ownership chain. Quietly, we don't come cheap, but cases like this, we're good at finding the dirt." I hesitated for half a second, then took the card. "I'll think about it." Before leaving, Evelyn added, "One more thing. Whoever set this up knew exactly what they were doing. This isn't amateur hour. Be careful who you trust." On the drive home, I replayed her words over and over. Be careful who you trust. That list of family lies on my desk suddenly felt too short. I stopped by the house again, needing to see it with new eyes. The sold sign remained, but something had changed. The locks had been replaced. I tried my old key, it didn't fit. Through the window, I saw Lucas pacing inside the living room, phone pressed to his ear. My parents weren't there. It was just him, moving like a restless animal. I stepped out of the car and knocked sharply on the door. Lucas opened it halfway, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I should be asking you that," I shot back. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" He forced a laugh. "Figure what out?" "The buyer, Henderson Development Group. You're not even trying to hide it, Lucas." For a moment, his face betrayed panic, but it hardened quickly. "You're digging in places you don't understand. No, you're playing with things that don't belong to you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have no idea what kind of mess you're walking into." I met his stare. Then enlighten me. He didn't answer. Instead, he slammed the door shut. I heard the deadbolt click. I stood there for a moment, shaking not from fear but from the realization that I was right. He was in this up to his neck, and he was scared. That evening, I met with Mr. Harlow again, folder from Evelyn in hand. When I explained everything, his expression shifted from professional concern to something sharper. "This changes things," he said. "If Lucas used a shell company to buy the property, that's not just fraud, it's fraudulent conveyance. He could face criminal charges. Can we prove it? We'll subpoena Henderson's records. If the registered agent matches Lucas's shell structure, it's game over." I hesitated. "This is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it?" He nodded. "Bethany, you're not just fighting for a house anymore. You're about to dismantle your family's financial machine." The words made me shiver. Dismantle. Family, financial machine. How did it come to this? Later that night, I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by papers, emails, and photos. My corkboard was growing crowded, threads of red yarn stretching between documents like veins. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom. "Lucas is upset. Please stop making this harder than it needs to be. We can fix this together." I stared at it, anger rising. They still believed this was negotiable. Like betrayal could be smoothed over with family dinners. I typed slowly, "You can't fix what you destroyed." Then I put the phone down. Mom called 5 minutes later. I didn't answer. The next morning, I decided it was time to go on the offensive. I hired Evelyn's firm to dig deeper. I told them to trace not just Henderson Development Group, but every entity tied to Lucas over the past decade. Evelyn's eyes lit up. "We'll get started right away. Give us 2 weeks." I didn't have 2 weeks, but I had something better, momentum. I started documenting every interaction, every text, call, conversation with my parents and Lucas, dates, times, witnesses. If this turned into a legal war, I wanted their lies pinned to the wall with nails. That afternoon, I returned to Grandma's USB, scanning her handwritten notes more carefully. Tucked between the ledgers was a letter addressed to me, written 2 months before she passed. "Bethany, if they're reading this over your shoulder, stop. Some truths can't be shared until the right moment. Remember what I told you about the oak chest." "Love, Grandma." I froze. The oak chest. It wasn't just furniture. Grandma always said it was where the past lives. It used to sit at the foot of her bed, carved with swirling vines and brass handles. When I'd checked her room earlier, the chest was gone. I drove straight back to the house. The movers had cleared out most of the upstairs, but the garage door was unlocked. I crept inside quietly. The chest sat in the far corner, wrapped in plastic, ready to be hauled away. I peeled the plastic off and ran my fingers along the carvings. The brass lock was intact, but Grandma's old trick came back to me. She'd once shown me a loose panel underneath. I slid my fingers beneath the base and felt a notch. With a soft click, a hidden compartment popped open. Inside was a stack of envelopes, sealed with wax. My name was on the top one. My hands shook as I tore it open. "Bethany, if you found this, then the storm has begun. There are documents here that must never fall into their hands. Keep them safe. They will try to take everything, but they can only succeed if you let them." Behind the letter were several legal documents, more deeds, old wills, and something that looked like a trust document I'd never seen before. I barely had time to process it before I heard footsteps. Heavy, close. "Lucas." "Bait," his voice echoed. "What the hell are you doing?" I turned slowly. He stood at the entrance, arms crossed, expression dark. "Just picking up what's mine," I said. He stepped forward. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," I shot back. "You're trespassing. This is my house now." "No, Lucas, it's not legally, and soon not on paper either." We stood there like two predators circling the same kill. For the first time in our lives, neither of us was backing down. Lucas and I stood facing each other in Grandma's garage like two gunfighters before a duel. His jaw was clenched, his hands balled into fists. I could see the pulse in his neck. "Give me those," he said, nodding at the envelopes in my hands. I held them tighter. "These belong to Grandma, which means they belong to me now. You don't get to take anything else." He stepped closer, towering over me. For a moment, I saw the same bully who used to shove me off the swing set when we were kids. But I wasn't that girl anymore. "You think you're smart, Bait," he sneered. "You have no idea what you're playing with." "And you do," I shot back. "All those fake companies, Henderson Group, you thought I wouldn't find out?" His eyes narrowed. "You don't know half of it." "Then tell me," I said calmly, "or I'll let a judge find out for you." The flicker of fear crossed his face again, quick but real. He backed up a step. "You're making a mistake." "No, Lucas," I said quietly. "I'm finally stopping yours." I pushed past him, envelopes clutched to my chest, heart pounding. He didn't follow. He just stood there, watching me go with an expression that was half rage, half calculation. Back at my apartment, I locked the door, drew the curtains, and laid everything from the oak chest on my table. The trust document immediately caught my eye. It was dated 7 years ago, 3 years before Grandma passed. It wasn't just a will. It was a living trust listing assets that went far beyond the house: stocks, bonds, rental properties, and something called the Bluebird account. The beneficiaries section listed one name, mine. My breath hitched. Grandma had transferred everything quietly, long before she died, which meant my parents and Lucas had been bleeding a trust that wasn't theirs for years. No wonder they'd forged my signature. They weren't just stealing a house. They were covering years of theft. I took photos of every page, backed them up to 2 encrypted drives, and hid the originals in a safety deposit box I opened that same afternoon. I wasn't going to risk Lucas accidentally breaking into my apartment. Then I made a new list. At the top, set a trap. I needed to catch Lucas or my parents saying something incriminating, something that would blow up their family misunderstanding narrative in court. 2 days later, I drove to my parents' house unannounced. Mom opened the door with a brittle smile. "Bait, what a surprise." "I wanted to talk," I said sweetly. "Family to family." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned. "Of course, come in." The house smelled like lavender and lemon polish, her way of pretending everything was still nice. Dad sat at the kitchen table, scrolling on his tablet. Lucas wasn't there. Good. I placed my phone face down on the table, recording the app running. "I've been thinking," I began, pouring fake warmth into my voice. "Maybe we can find a compromise." Dad raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you get a portion of the proceeds, I keep legal ownership, and Lucas stops using shell companies to steal from me." Their reactions were priceless. Mom stiffened. Dad froze mid-scroll. "What are you talking about?" Mom asked carefully. "Come on," I said, leaning back. "Henderson Group, registered agent same as Lucas's company? You really thought I wouldn't find it?" Dad slammed the tablet down. Lucas made a few mistakes, but he did it to help the family. There it was. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Admission number 1. "And forging my signature?" I asked softly. "Was that also to help the family?" Mom exhaled sharply. "We didn't forge anything." "Really?" I tilted my head. "Because the county clerk and Mr. Harlow say otherwise, not to mention the judge who froze the sale." Dad muttered, "You should have just trusted us." "Trusted you?" I repeated slowly. "To steal from me legally?" They both fell silent. The recording app captured every second. I stood abruptly. "I'll let the lawyers handle it. Thanks for the chat." As I left, Mom followed me to the door, lowering her voice. "Bethany, don't destroy this family." I turned to her. "You already did." That night, I listened to the recording 3 times. Their tone, their wording, it was gold. It wasn't a confession of every crime, but it proved knowledge and intent. Mr. Harlow confirmed it could be devastating in court, but I wasn't done. Lucas was avoiding me, which meant he was hiding something, so I followed him. "Yeah," I tailed my brother. He'd been driving to a nondescript office park on the outskirts of town 3 times in a week. On the 4th day, I parked across the street, camera ready. I watched him enter a suite labeled Westbrook Financial Consulting. 10 minutes later, a man in a tailored suit and too much cologne joined him. They stayed inside for nearly an hour. When Lucas finally came out, he wasn't smiling. He looked pale. He made a call in the parking lot, pacing like a trapped animal. I couldn't hear what he said, but I got clear photos of him with the man. Later, a quick search revealed the man was a bankruptcy attorney, specializing in high-value asset protection. Lucas wasn't just scheming. He was scrambling. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Evelyn on a video call. I showed her the trust documents, the photos from the parking lot, and the recording from my parents. Her eyes widened. "Bethany, this is bigger than I thought. If those trust documents are legitimate and they look at you're sitting on enough evidence for a civil suit and potential criminal charges. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery, you name it." "I'm not rushing," I said. "I want to build this right." She smiled faintly. "Smart. Lucas is sloppy, but your parents are cautious. They'll make one big mistake eventually. You just have to give them the space to do it." "I was thinking the same thing," I said, "so I'm going to bait them." She raised an eyebrow. "How?" "By letting them think I'm willing to negotiate. I'll get Lucas and Dad in the same room. If they believe I'm backing down, they'll talk freely. I'll record everything." She nodded slowly. "That could work, dangerous but smart." 3 days later, I called Dad and suggested a sit-down with Lucas to find common ground. He agreed faster than I expected. Greed makes people careless. We met at a quiet diner outside town, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and unlimited coffee. I placed my bag next to me, phone hidden inside, recording again. Lucas arrived late looking exhausted and irritable. Dad tried to play peacemaker. We're all family, let's talk like adults. Sure, I said sweetly. Let's talk about how you plan to flip Grandma's house to pay off Lucas's debts. Lucas froze mid-sip. Bait. Relax, I said. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make a deal. For the next 30 minutes, I played them like a violin, nodding, feigning hesitation, pretending to be reasonable. And it worked. Dad started talking numbers. Lucas accidentally mentioned Henderson Group out loud, and both admitted the sale had been necessary to cover financial holes. Every word was recorded. As I drove home, the adrenaline finally hit. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from power. For the first time in my life, I had them cornered, not emotionally, not morally, but legally. And this was just the beginning. The preliminary hearing was set for a Tuesday morning, 9:00 a.m., in courtroom 3B. I barely slept the night before. My kitchen table was buried under folders, highlighted printouts, timelines, and post-its. My corkboard looked like a conspiracy theorist's dream, red threads linking names, dates, shell companies, trust accounts, and Henderson Development Group. But it wasn't a conspiracy. It was my family. When I walked into the courthouse, wearing my best blazer and heels that clicked with purpose, I saw them waiting by the elevators. Mom in her beige suit, pearls at her neck. Dad stiff, pretending to read something on his phone. Lucas leaned against the wall, arms crossed, exuding forced confidence. They all looked up when they saw me. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Mom plastered on her concerned mother face. Bethany, she said softly, we don't have to do this. I smiled coldly. Oh, but we do. Lucas muttered something under his breath. Dad shot him a warning glance. Mr. Harlow arrived right on time, briefcase in hand, nodding at me with quiet approval. Ready? He asked. I took a deep breath. Let's do it. The hearing was procedural, meant to determine whether there was enough evidence to freeze the sale and set a trial date. But it felt like the opening salvo of a war. The opposing counsel was a slick man in a navy suit named Mark Denning, representing my parents and Lucas. He looked like he'd stepped straight out of a real estate firm's brochure. Your Honor, he began smoothly, this is a simple family misunderstanding that's been blown out of proportion. The property was sold in good faith, the proceeds intended for the benefit of all parties. Harlow cut in, sharp as a blade. With a forged signature, Your Honor, my client's signature. Denning smirked. Allegedly. The judge, a stern woman with sharp glasses, raised a hand. Let's stick to the facts. Ms. Maldonado, please approach. I stepped up, palms sweating but chin lifted. Harlow handed over the documents, the forged deed, the audio recordings, the injunction filings, and the trust papers. He laid it out methodically. Your Honor, he said, this is not simply a dispute over property. This is deliberate fraud. The defendants, Ms. Maldonado's parents and brother, conspired to sell her legally inherited property to a shell company tied directly to her brother. They forged her signature and attempted to move the proceeds offshore. We are asking for the sale to be voided immediately and for a formal investigation. The judge flipped through the papers. Denning tried to object twice but got shut down both times. When she reached the trust documents, her brow furrowed. This trust predates the sale, she said. Yes, Your Honor, Harlow replied. Everything they sold was already under my client's sole control. Lucas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. After 30 tense minutes, the judge finally leaned back. I see no reason to lift the injunction. In fact, based on what I'm seeing, I'm extending the freeze to all connected accounts pending discovery. Trial is set for 6 weeks from now. Lucas exploded. 6 weeks? This is ridiculous. The judge slammed her gavel once. Mr. Maldonado, another outburst like that and I'll hold you in contempt. Mom reached over to calm him, whispering frantically. I couldn't help it when Lucas caught my eye. I smiled, just a little. It drove him crazy. Outside the courtroom, the air was sharp with tension. Denning approached me as my parents hovered a few feet away. Ms. Maldonado, he said smoothly. You're young, emotional, I get it, but this doesn't have to ruin the family. Drop the suit, take a settlement. What settlement? I asked flatly. A cash payout, half the sale amount. Walk away clean, no more legal fees, no more drama, I laughed. You think this is about money? He blinked, thrown off. This is about the fact that they tried to erase me, I said, my voice steady, and I'm not for sale. I walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks. That afternoon, Lucas called me. Twice. I ignored both calls, then he showed up outside my apartment building. Bait, he yelled from the parking lot. Come down here. I opened my window but didn't go down. What do you want? He looked up at me, exasperated. You're ruining everything. Do you even know what's at stake? Yeah, I said. My name, my inheritance, my future. He ran a hand through his hair. You don't understand, there are other people involved, people who expect their money back. Bingo. There it was again, that flicker of fear. Who? I asked. He shook his head. Just back off before you get hurt. I stared at him. Was that a threat? It's a warning, he snapped. You think the law will protect you from everyone? Then he jumped in his car and sped off. That night I called Evelyn. I told her exactly what Lucas said. Her voice was calm, but I heard the edge underneath. He's not bluffing. Shell companies like Henderson don't pop up alone. Someone bankrolled this. If Lucas is in debt to the wrong people, he may have promised them assets he doesn't own. So what do? I asked. We keep digging, and you keep your guard up. A few days later, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, a photocopy of a loan agreement between Henderson Development Group and a private lender named Sierra Capital for a staggering amount. The collateral listed was my grandmother's house. I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone out there had lent Lucas money against property he didn't own, and now that loan was in limbo. I called Evelyn immediately. Someone's watching this case. This came in the mail. She whistled softly when I sent her a photo. Bethany, this is the first outside thread. If Sierra Capital doesn't get their collateral, they'll come for whoever signed the deal. Lucas, I said, and possibly anyone tied to him, she added, including your parents. I sat down hard. The war wasn't just in my family anymore. There were sharks in the water. The next time I saw Mom, she looked scared, not for me, for herself. We need to talk, she whispered on the porch, glancing around nervously. About what? I asked. Lucas, he's in over his head. There are people he made promises he can't keep. If you don't drop this, they'll come after him. I folded my arms. He should have thought about that before stealing. She grabbed my hand suddenly, gripped tight. Please. You don't know what they're capable of. I looked at her, really looked. For the first time, I saw genuine fear, not manipulation, but it didn't change the fact that she'd chosen this path. You raised him, I said softly, and you covered for him. This is the storm you built. I walked away, her voice trailing after me. That night, staring at the trust documents spread across my floor, I realized something vital. I wasn't just fighting to reclaim what was mine anymore. I was up against Lucas's debts, his fake companies, my parents' complicity, and now, outside players who didn't care about family, only collateral. But unlike Lucas, I had nothing to hide. And that made me dangerous. The Sierra Capital loan agreement sat on my kitchen table like a live grenade. Every time I glanced at it, I imagined a countdown clock ticking somewhere, Lucas sweating and faceless, investors growing impatient. If Sierra lent money using my grandmother's house as collateral, then Lucas had signed a fraudulent contract. And if they came looking to collect, they'd discover the property freeze and turn their attention elsewhere. Maybe him, maybe me. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for that shoe to drop. I called Evelyn first thing in the morning. I want to know everything about Sierra Capital, I told her. She didn't hesitate. Give me 48 hours. They're private lenders. These things are messy. I don't care how messy, dig deep. While Evelyn worked her contacts, I turned my attention back to the family. Tension was cracking through their carefully constructed facade like hairline fractures in glass. Mom started texting me cryptic messages. He's scared. Please don't push him. We can fix this if you stop the lawsuit. Dad, on the other hand, sent one curt message. You're destroying us. I didn't reply. The truth was, they were destroying themselves. I was just shining a light on it. 2 days later, Evelyn called me late at night. Bethany, you might want to sit down for this. I was already sitting, but my heart kicked up. What did you find? Sierra Capital is not exactly a traditional lender, she said carefully. They're technically registered as a private equity group, but they operate in the gray. They finance high-risk developments, usually through intermediaries. Their CEO is a man named Gideon Clark, ex-developer, rumored to have mob ties in the 90s. My skin prickled. Mob ties? It's never been proven, but let's just say people don't cross Gideon twice. If Lucas took money from them, he's either very stupid or very desperate. I let out a long breath. Probably both. There's more, she added. The loan was signed 6 weeks ago. Due date for repayment is in 4 weeks. If he doesn't deliver, they can seize the collateral. But the house isn't legally his, I said. She paused. Exactly, which means they're about to realize they've been conned. And when that happens, they're going to want to find the person who signed that paper. Lucas, I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I came home to find a man in a charcoal suit leaning against the wall near my building's entrance. Sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. The kind of man who looked like he didn't do small talk. Bethany Maldonado? He asked as I approached. Yes. He flipped open a wallet, no badge, just a business card with the Sierra Capital logo. "My boss would like to speak with you." Every instinct screamed danger. "Tell your boss to talk to my lawyer," he smirked. "He prefers conversations without middlemen." "I don't," I said firmly. For a second the air thickened. Then he slipped the card into my hand and walked away like a shadow dissolving. On the back of the card, Gideon Clark, Blue Harbor Hotel, Suite 801, tomorrow. 1 p.m. I stared at it, my pulse pounding. Meeting Gideon Clark sounded like walking into a lion's den, but avoiding it, that might make things worse. I called Mr. Harlow. "They want to meet." "Don't go alone," he warned, "and don't agree to anything." The next day, I found myself in the plush lobby of the Blue Harbor Hotel. Marble floors, chandeliers, the faint scent of expensive cigars. Suite 801 was at the end of a quiet hallway. 2 men in suits opened the door when I knocked. Inside, Gideon Clark sat in a leather armchair like a king holding court. Late 60s, silver hair slicked back, wearing a dark 3-piece suit. His smile was all teeth and calculation. "Ms. Maldonado," he said warmly, as if we were old friends. "Thank you for coming." I stayed standing. "You wanted to talk?" "Yes, about your brother." He gestured to a chair. I sat slowly, keeping my face neutral. "You see," Gideon continued, "Lucas came to us with a promising deal, a house with strong equity. Quick flip, clean profit, we financed him accordingly. Now we find out the property is legally complicated." "Because it's mine," I said evenly, "and he forged documents to pretend it's his." He chuckled softly. "Yes, that's what our lawyers discovered, which is why I'm giving you an opportunity, Ms. Maldonado. Resolve this, quietly." "What exactly does that mean?" "Withdraw your lawsuit, lift the freeze, let the sale proceed. We'll give you a generous payout and Lucas will handle the debt." I almost laughed. "You think I'd help you clean up his mess?" His smile thinned. "I think you're a reasonable woman who doesn't want unnecessary trouble." The threat was silk-wrapped but unmistakable. I leaned forward slightly. "With all due respect, Mr. Clark, Lucas lied to you, not me. If you have a problem, take it up with him." His eyes sharpened like a knife catching light. "Oh, we will." The meeting ended with polite handshakes, but the message was clear. Sierra was now officially in the game. That night, Mom called, panicked. "What did you do?" "Excuse me. Gideon Clark came to see Lucas today. He's furious. He's threatening legal action, or worse." "Maybe Lucas should have thought of that before forging signatures," I said coldly. "You don't understand." "No, Mom, you don't understand. I'm not the villain here." She went quiet. I could hear her breathing shaky. "He's my son, Bethany." "And I'm your daughter," I said, but that never seemed to matter as much. Click. The next week was a storm. Sierra Capital filed an intervention motion in court, demanding their collateral be unfrozen or replaced. Harlow tore it apart in his response, pointing out their entire claim was built on a fraudulent deed. The judge didn't lift a finger in their favor. Lucas, meanwhile, spiraled. He showed up at my door one night, drunk and wild-eyed. He pounded until I opened. "You ruined everything," he shouted, stumbling inside. "Do you know what Gideon's going to do to me?" "Not my problem," I said, backing away. He grabbed my arm. "Please, help me." For a moment, I saw the brother I'd loved as a kid, scared, broken. But then I remembered the forged papers, the smug smile, the way he'd looked down on me for years. I pulled my arm free. "No." He stared at me like I'd stabbed him. "You're really going to let them come for me?" I whispered. "You already let them come for me." Then I shut the door in his face. 2 days later, Evelyn's team sent me their latest findings. Sierra Capital wasn't just an investor. They were entangled with 2 of Lucas's shell companies, funneling money through side accounts. Lucas had tied himself to them in ways that made his downfall inevitable, and my lawsuit had accidentally exposed their web. Gideon Clark wasn't just angry, he was cornered too. And in that realization, a plan started forming. If Sierra wanted their money and Lucas couldn't pay, there was one way to make sure they aimed their fury in the right direction: show them the truth publicly. Not behind closed doors, in court, where the forged documents would shred Lucas's lies in front of a judge. This wasn't just about winning anymore. This was about turning their weapons against each other. For the first time since this began, I felt something other than fear or anger. I felt control. By the time the second week rolled around, I could feel the pressure building like storm clouds gathering over the house I once called home. Lucas had stopped calling, Mom's messages had turned from pleading to accusatory, and Dad had gone completely silent. But silence doesn't mean surrender. It means plotting. The first sign came on a Wednesday morning. I opened my email and nearly spit out my coffee. Sitting in my inbox was a forwarded message from the county clerk's office. "Notice, A new affidavit has been filed contesting the validity of the original trust. Filed by Lucas Maldonado. My hands tightened around the mug. Oh, you sneaky little bastard. I immediately called Mr. Harlow. He answered on the first ring. I saw it, he said grimly. Lucas is claiming the trust documents were fabricated and that you coerced Grandma in her final years. I almost laughed. He's accusing me of forgery after what he did. Classic deflection tactic, Harlow said. He's hoping to muddy the waters, drag out the trial, and make you look unstable in front of the judge. But if we stay sharp, this can backfire on him. I glanced at the trust copies pinned to my corkboard. Then let's make it backfire. That afternoon, I drove out to visit Grandma's old attorney, Mr. Keene, a retired, soft-spoken man who'd handled her affairs before Harlow. His bungalow smelled like lemon polish and books. He welcomed me in with a gentle smile. Bethany, you look just like her, you know? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Mr. Keene, I need your help. Lucas is trying to contest the trust. He frowned. I prepared that trust. I sat with your grandmother for weeks to make sure every word reflected her wishes. She was sharp until the very end. Would you testify to that? His eyes hardened in a way that surprised me. Gladly. Meanwhile, Lucas wasn't just fighting legally, he was fighting publicly. By Friday, distant relatives and old neighbors started reaching out with confused, awkward messages. Lucas says you're trying to steal the house from your parents. I heard you forged something. He was spinning the narrative in the court of family gossip. And unfortunately, gossip travels faster than subpoenas. So I did something I hadn't planned. I posted a public statement on my social media. Calm. Factual. No drama. My grandmother left her home and assets to me legally. Those documents were forged without my consent. The courts have frozen the sale while we investigate. I love my family, but love doesn't mean silence in the face of betrayal. Within hours, the post exploded. Friends and even distant cousins chimed in with support. A few snide comments from Lucas's camp popped up, but the tide shifted. People love a clear underdog fighting a corrupt system. Mom called that night, furious. How dare you air our dirty laundry like that? I sighed. You mean your dirty laundry. This family will never be the same after this, she hissed. Good, I said softly, because the way it wasn't healthy. She hung up on me. Lucas's next move was even riskier. He tried to reach out to Sierra Capital directly, pitching them some alternative deal without telling them about the extended freeze. How do I know? Because Evelyn called me laughing in disbelief. He sent them a proposal to refinance the house using your name again, she said. He forged a preliminary consent letter. My blood ran cold. Are you serious? Dead serious. Gideon's lawyers caught it immediately, and now Gideon is not happy. The next day, Lucas's name popped up in a court filing again, but this time it wasn't from me. It was from Sierra Capital. They filed their own motion accusing Lucas of misrepresentation and fraud, seeking to sever any future agreements and distance themselves legally. The sharks were turning on their own. Mom showed up at my apartment 2 nights later. No warning, just a frantic knock on the door. When I opened it, she looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair messy in a way I'd never seen. Bethany, please, she said. You have to talk to Lucas. He's losing it. Gideon's men are following him. I crossed my arms. Why should I care? Because he's your brother. He's also a forger, a liar, and a thief, I snapped. And he's the one who dragged you into this mess. Tears welled in her eyes. We thought we were protecting the family. We didn't realize how far he'd go. I stared at her. For a moment, the anger wavered. I saw the woman who used to brush my hair before school, who'd hold my hand when thunderstorms scared me. But then I remembered the porch, the movers, the folder in her hands. You realized, I said quietly. You just looked away. She didn't deny it. She just whispered, I don't know how to fix this anymore. I exhaled. I do, but it's not going to be pretty. The next day, during a pre-trial conference, the unexpected happened. Sierra Capital's lawyers requested to depose Lucas early. Their tone was sharp, almost eager. Gideon wasn't waiting until the trial to corner him. I sat in the back of the conference room as Lucas squirmed under questioning. Harlow leaned toward me and whispered, They're not treating him like an ally, they're treating him like a liability. Good, that was the point. Lucas tried to keep his composure, but when they brought up the second forged letter, his mask cracked. His lawyer fumbled objections. Gideon's legal team pounced like wolves. Afterward, Lucas stormed out of the building, catching sight of me near the elevators. You did this, he shouted. I met his glare. No, Lucas, you did this. I just stopped you from burying me with you. His face twisted with rage. You think you're winning? You have no idea what's coming. And then he walked away, shoulders hunched, like someone who just realized the walls were closing in. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment with a cup of tea, it hit me. The lines were fully drawn. Lucas was cornered legally and financially. Sierra Capital was now a hostile force aimed squarely at him. My parents were fractured, mom frightened, dad hiding, both losing control. And me, for the first time, I wasn't reacting, I was orchestrating. The storm that Grandma had warned me about wasn't on the horizon anymore. It was here, and I was standing in the center, unshaken. The night after Lucas's deposition, Denver was hit by an early spring storm. Sheets of rain pounded my windows, thunder rolled across the sky, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear a siren wailing. It felt poetic. For weeks, Lucas had played the arrogant schemer, convinced he could outmaneuver me, the court, and Sierra Capital. But now, with Gideon's men breathing down his neck and the legal net tightening, his mask was peeling off, and underneath was pure panic. It started with a series of late-night calls. First one at 1:47 a.m., then 2:03, then 3:12, each one more frantic than the last. I didn't answer. At 3:45, he left a voicemail. "Bait, please pick up. You don't understand what's happening. They're watching me. They followed me home. If you don't help me, they'll..." The message cut off with the sound of a car door slamming. For a brief second, a part of me, the little sister who used to sneak into his room during thunderstorms, wanted to call him back. But then I remembered every forged signature, every lie, every moment he chose greed over blood. I turned off my phone and went back to sleep. The next morning, Harlow and I met in his office to finalize our strategy for trial. His desk was buried under binders, exhibits, and timelines. The air smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. "Lucas's move to contest the trust is weak," Harlow said, flipping through documents. "Mr. Keene's testimony destroys that narrative. He's solid, sharp. And the video of your grandmother reading the trust aloud, that's the nail in the coffin." I smiled grimly. "He's going to regret ever filing that affidavit." "More than that," Harlow said, sliding a new folder toward me. "We found something else. Lucas opened a joint account with your father 3 months before the house sale. Guess where the deposit from Henderson Development landed 2 days after the forged sale?" My eyes scanned the documents. $1.4 million. Joint account. Lucas and Dad. My heart dropped, not from shock, but from confirmation. I'd always suspected Dad was more than just a passive bystander. Now I had proof. This changes everything," I whispered. "It does," Harlow said. "We can amend the complaint to include him as a direct co-conspirator." For years, Dad had stood quietly behind Mom, letting her do the emotional heavy lifting while he handled practical matters. He'd always presented himself as the reasonable one, the peacemaker. Turns out, he was just the silent thief. Meanwhile, Lucas was unraveling in real time. Mom showed up at my door again that evening, umbrella in hand, soaked to the bone. "He's not well," she blurted the moment I opened. "Lucas, he's drinking, he's paranoid, he keeps saying people are following him." "They are," I said flatly. "Sierra's not known for their patience." She flinched. "This isn't funny." "I'm not laughing." She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "Bethany, he's your brother. If he breaks, everything comes crashing down." "The trial, the house, everything." I crossed my arms. "You should have thought about that before helping him steal." For a moment, her mask slipped. She looked older, defeated. "I didn't know he'd pull you into this. I didn't know it would go this far." "Yes, you did," I said quietly. "You just didn't care until the consequences came home." She had no answer. 2 nights later, Lucas finally snapped. I was coming home from a late prep session with Harlow when I saw a figure sitting on the steps of my building, drenched in rain. Lucas. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his eyes wild like a trapped animal. "Bait," he croaked when he saw me. "You have to help me, please." I kept my distance. "What did you do?" "They're everywhere," he whispered. "Cars parked outside, men watching. Gideon sent someone to my office. He said if I don't pay, he'll make an example out of me." I swallowed. "Then maybe you should tell the court the truth." He lurched toward me, grabbing my shoulders. "I can't, you don't get it. If I go down, we all go down. Dad's involved. Mom knows. You think they'll let that get out?" My stomach twisted. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the desperation behind them. He wasn't lying to manipulate me this time, he was terrified. "I'm not protecting you," I said firmly. "Bait, no." I pushed past him and went inside. He didn't follow. The next day, Sierra Capital made their move. They filed a motion to compel Lucas's full financial records. And attached to the motion, a subpoena for Dad. Gideon wasn't just cornering Lucas anymore, he was going for everyone connected to him. Harlow's reaction was calm, almost surgical. "This works in our favor," he said. "The more Sierra digs, the more they expose themselves and the Maldonados. Let them tear each other apart. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't just defending my inheritance anymore. I was watching an empire of lies collapse from the inside. 1 week before trial, Evelyn called me with a piece of news that made everything click. "Bethany," she said, "we traced a wire transfer from Sierra Capital to Lucas's shell company. But guess what? It was immediately routed to an offshore account under Dad's name. Lucas wasn't the only one profiting. Your father was the quiet banker behind the scenes." My pulse quickened. "Can we prove it?" "We already did. Bank records don't lie." I hung up and sat in silence for a long moment. It wasn't just betrayal from my brother anymore. It was from both parents. Mom's tears, Dad's stoic face. They'd been standing on a mountain of stolen money all along. That night, Lucas left me one final voicemail. His voice was hoarse, frantic, broken. "You think you've won, Bate? You haven't. You've just lit a fuse you can't control. When this blows up, it's taking all of us with it. Even you." I deleted it without hesitation. As the trial approached, the roles had shifted completely. Lucas wasn't the predator anymore. He was prey, thrashing in the net. Mom was a ghost of her former self, torn between denial and fear. Dad had gone dark, no calls, no appearances, just quiet maneuvering behind closed doors. And me, I was sharpening my blade. I met with Harlow one last time before the pre-trial conference. We mapped out every exhibit, every witness. Grandma's video, Mr. Keen's testimony, the bank transfers, the forged documents, Sierra's intervention, Lucas's contradictions, Dad's offshore accounts. This wasn't just going to be a legal case, it was going to be a demolition. On the night before the trial, I stood outside my grandmother's house. Rain had finally stopped, leaving the world damp and quiet. I ran my hand along the porch railing, remembering summers on this porch with her, lemonade, stories, laughter. "This is for you," I whispered. Inside that house lay not just walls and floors, but everything they tried to steal from me, my past, my future, my place in the family. And tomorrow I was taking it all back. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was the nerves, the adrenaline, or the weight of what I was about to do. Either way, as I sat at the plaintiff's table that morning, watching the courtroom fill, it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. This was it, the trial. Mom sat 2 rows behind Lucas, hands clasped, knuckles white. Lucas fidgeted at the defense table like a man sitting on a live wire. Sierra Capital's legal team occupied the second defense table, slick suits, unreadable faces. But it was Dad who unsettled me most. He wasn't fidgeting or hiding or nervously glancing around. He was still, too still. He sat beside Lucas, hands folded, expression calm, the picture of control. For years, that calm had fooled everyone, not anymore. Judge Whitmore entered, robes flowing, eyes sharp. "This court is now in session," she announced. "Maldonado versus Maldonado et al. Counsel, are you ready to proceed?" Harlow rose. "Ready for the plaintiff, Your Honor." Mark Denning rose for the defense. "Ready, Your Honor." Sierra's lead attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Talbot, nodded. "Ready for intervener Sierra Capital." The opening statements passed like distant thunder. Denning painted me as a bitter daughter, desperate for attention and money. Harlow countered with cold facts, forged signatures, trust documents, shell companies. Talbot, representing Sierra, made it clear they were innocent lenders misled by Lucas Maldonado. But she didn't mention my father. Not yet. She didn't know what I had tucked inside my binder. A set of wire transfer records Evelyn had unearthed just in time. Lucas may have been reckless, but Dad was the architect. And today, that mask was coming off. The first witness was Mr. Keen, Grandma's attorney. His calm, measured testimony shredded Lucas's claim that the trust was coerced. The jury listened intently as he described my grandmother, sharp-minded, firm, deliberate. "She looked me in the eye," he said, "and told me, word for word, Bethany is the only one who ever respected this home. The others only see dollar signs." Denning tried to shake him on cross, but Keen didn't budge. Decades of legal work had made him immovable. Next came the forensic document examiner, confirming the deed's signature was forged. Then Evelyn, who laid out the shell company structure Lucas had used like a spider web. The jury's eyes widened when she explained how Henderson Development was essentially Lucas wearing a different mask. And then, it was time. Harlow called me to the stand. My pulse thundered in my ears as I walked up, swore in, and took my seat. I'd been rehearsing this moment for weeks, but nothing prepares you for staring down your entire family in open court. "Bethany," Harlow began gently, "can you tell the court why this house matters to you?" I took a breath. "Because it's not just a house. It's my grandmother's legacy. It's where I grew up. It's the last place that ever felt safe. Did your parents or brother ever inform you of their intent to sell it? No. Did you sign any documents authorizing the sale? No, someone forged my signature. I glanced at Lucas. He looked away. Then Harlow shifted gears. Bethany, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 42. He held up a packet of documents. Can you explain to the court what this is? I nodded. These are bank records Evelyn's team discovered. Wire transfers. They show where the proceeds from the fraudulent house sale were sent. The courtroom hushed. Please read the destination account. Joint account, I said slowly, letting each word cut through the air. Under the names Lucas Maldonado and Daniel Maldonado. My father's head snapped toward me. Harlow continued, voice steady. Daniel Maldonado, that's your father? Yes. And were you aware that your father had opened this account with Lucas prior to the sale? No. What happened to the $1.4 million deposited after the fraudulent sale? I flipped to the next page. A large portion was wired offshore to an account under my father's sole name. The rest was divided between multiple smaller accounts. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Dad's mask cracked, not much, just a flicker. But after years of stone-faced control, that flicker was seismic. Denning leapt up. Objection, relevance, overruled, Judge Whitmore said sharply. The financial trail is central to this case. Harlow turned to me again. Bethany, how did you feel when you saw your father's name on these transfers? For a heartbeat, the courtroom blurred. All the memories rushed in at once. Him teaching me to ride a bike, his quiet reassurances during childhood storms, the way he always seemed like the anchor of the family. And then the image of his name on those documents. Raid, I said softly, but mostly I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. The jury shifted, several exchanging glances. Betrayal hits differently when it's your own blood. Then came the twist. Ms. Talbot, Sierra's attorney, requested permission to cross-examine. Her tone was smooth, but there was an edge. Ms. Maldonado, you're saying your father was involved in these financial transfers? Yes. Are you aware that Sierra Capital was not informed of this joint account? I met her gaze. Yes. And I think that makes two of us. Her jaw tightened. Gideon Clark, sitting in the gallery, leaned forward slightly. For the first time, he looked less like a lion watching prey and more like a man realizing someone else had been playing the board behind his back. She pivoted to the judge. Your Honor, Sierra Capital would like to amend their intervention claim to include Mr. Daniel Maldonado as a co-conspirator in the fraudulent transfer. The room exploded in whispers. Dad stood suddenly, face flushed. This is ridiculous. Sit down, Mr. Maldonado, the judge barked. Counsel will handle this. For a man who'd spent his life avoiding the spotlight, being dragged under it like this was devastating. Mom covered her mouth with both hands. Lucas turned to Dad, stunned. You told me this was under control, Lucas hissed. Dad didn't answer. When I stepped down from the stand, my legs were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. For months, they'd treated me like the child at the table, the one without power. But today, I'd pulled the mask off the quietest thief of all. Harlow leaned in and whispered, "Well done." I glanced at Dad as I returned to my seat. For the first time in my life, he looked cornered, and that felt like justice beginning. By the time court recessed for the day, the entire dynamic had shifted. Lucas was no longer the sole focus. Sierra had turned its attention to Dad. Mom sat in stunned silence, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Gideon's lawyers were already drafting motions. The storm wasn't coming. It had landed in the courtroom, and tomorrow it was going to get even worse. Day 2 of the trial felt different. The courtroom buzzed before the judge even entered, like everyone could sense the blood in the water. Yesterday's twist had cracked open the facade of my family. Today, it was time to watch the pieces fall. Lucas came in late, his tie crooked, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Dad walked beside him, stiff, jaw clenched. They didn't speak to each other. Mom followed a few steps behind, clutching a tissue in one hand and her purse in the other like it could shield her from reality. On the other side, Sierra Capital's legal team had doubled in size overnight. Gideon Clark himself sat in the second row, arms folded, gaze fixed on my father like a predator measuring the next strike. When Judge Whitmore entered, the murmurs died instantly. She adjusted her glasses. Let's continue. Defense, you may call your first witness. Denning called Lucas. As he walked to the stand, I studied his face. This wasn't the cocky older brother who'd laughed when I confronted him weeks ago. This was a man cornered, lashing out because it was all he had left. He raised his hand, swore in, sat down. Denning began softly, trying to paint him as a misunderstood entrepreneur. Lucas, did you ever intend to harm your sister? No, Lucas said quickly. Never. It was supposed to be a business deal. She didn't understand how these things work. I clenched my fists. Denning leaned in. Explain to the jury what you were trying to accomplish. I saw an opportunity, Lucas said. Grandma's house was sitting there, collecting dust. I had connections. Henderson Development was ready to flip it, make everyone money, I thought. If I moved quickly, I could set up a deal that benefited all of us. And your sister. She's always been emotional about the house, he said, shaking his head like I was a child. I figured once the money came in, she'd see reason. My heart thudded, but I kept my face neutral. Harlow warned me, don't let him bait you. Denning guided him through a sanitized version of events. Fake intentions, convenient half-truths, painting the forgery as a mistake by a third party. It was textbook damage control. Then Harlow stood up for Cross. Lucas, he began, voice calm but sharp. You say you did this for the family? Yes. Then why forge Bethany's signature? Lucas shifted. It wasn't me, Harlow interrupted. You set up Henderson, you transferred the funds, you opened the joint account. Are you saying someone else did all that? Lucas swallowed. I had help. From your father? The question landed like a hammer. Lucas hesitated too long. The jury saw it. He advised me. Harlow held up the bank records. Advised you to send $1.4 million offshore? Advised you to forge legal documents? Lucas's voice cracked. You don't understand how much pressure I was under. No, Harlow said, stepping closer. We understand perfectly. You lied, you stole, and when you got caught, you blamed everyone else. Lucas's mask slipped. Bethany doesn't care about the family. She just wants to ruin us. I met his eyes for the first time all morning. You ruined us yourself, I said quietly. The jury heard it. So did the judge. Next, Denning called my father. The room tensed. Even Sierra's lawyers leaned forward. He walked to the stand with the controlled movements of a man who believed he could still salvage everything. He swore in, sat down. Denning began carefully. Mr. Maldonado, did you ever intend to defraud your daughter? Of course not, Dad said smoothly. I was trying to keep the family stable. Lucas had business troubles, and I stepped in to make sure things didn't spiral. I didn't know about the forgery. Talbot, Sierra's attorney, shot up like a coiled spring. Objection, mischaracterization of financial records. Overruled. Counsel, you'll have your turn, the judge said. Dad continued, painting himself as a reluctant bystander swept into his son's mistakes. It was chilling how effortlessly he slipped into the role, voice calm, gestures measured, even a touch of regret in his tone. He'd been performing his entire life. But Harlow wasn't fooled. Mr. Maldonado, Harlow said when it was his turn, you claim ignorance of these transfers, yet your name is on the offshore account receiving $1.1 million days after the sale. Care to explain? Dad smiled faintly. Lucas managed that account. I trusted him, Harlow pressed. The account is solely in your name. He hesitated, just a flicker, but it was enough. Isn't it true, Harlow continued, voice tightening, that you were not a bystander but the financial architect behind this fraud, that without your accounts, none of this would have been possible? Dad leaned back, masking his discomfort with a thin smile. I did what I had to do for this family. There it was, the truth slipping through arrogance. The jury's reaction was unmistakable. Several leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Sierra's lawyers scribbled furiously. Gideon's jaw flexed. Then it was Sierra's turn. Talbot stood, heels clicking like gunshots. Mr. Maldonado, Sierra Capital entered this deal on the assumption that Lucas was the sole party. We were unaware of your offshore accounts. That's not my problem, Dad said flatly. Her smile was sharp. It's about to be. She produced a signed side agreement between Lucas and Sierra, an agreement that had been quietly amended weeks after the original loan. The amendment added Daniel Maldonado as a financial guarantor. The courtroom gasped. Even I froze. Harlow's eyebrows shot up. He hadn't seen this either. Talbot's voice cut like glass. This document was discovered in Sierra's records late last night. Mr. Maldonado, this is your signature, correct? Dad's face drained of color. Your Honor, she continued, Sierra Capital moves to amend their claim to include Daniel Maldonado not just as co-conspirator, but as primary liable party for the loan default. Mr. Clark's company intends to recover the full debt from him personally. Judge Whitmore nodded. Noted for the record, the motion will be reviewed. Mom let out a small, strangled sob behind me. Lucas turned on Dad, his voice breaking. You signed something with Sierra? You told me it was just my name. Dad snapped. I had to protect what was left. You were spiraling. You threw me to the wolves, Lucas yelled. The judge banged her gavel. Order, order. But it was too late. The facade was shattered. Father and son, co-conspirators days ago, were now tearing each other apart in open court. Sierra watched like satisfied vultures. And me? I just sat there calm, watching the empire they'd built crumble under the weight of their own lies. By the end of the day, the defense table was fractured. Lucas looked like a wreck. Dad stared at nothing, calculating in silence. Sierra's attorneys smelled blood. Harlow leaned over and whispered, "This is it, Bethany. One more push tomorrow and the jury will see the whole picture." I nodded. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the verdict. I was ready for it. The third and final day of the trial felt like the air itself was holding its breath. When I stepped into the courtroom that morning, every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters had started gathering outside. What had begun as a private family matter had evolved into something far larger, a public reckoning. Lucas sat slumped at the defense table, eyes red, suit wrinkled, a shadow of the brother I once idolized. My father sat beside him, cold and still, the mask of control cracked but not fully gone. Sierra Capital's legal team radiated quiet confidence. They'd shifted their strategy to devour him, not defend him. And me? I felt steady. Not calm, never calm, but steady. Like the ground beneath me had finally stopped shifting. The day began with closing arguments. Denning went first. He tried his best to paint my family as flawed but loving, caught in a misunderstanding spun out of control. His voice trembled on the word family. Then Talbot, for Sierra, followed. Her speech was razor-sharp. Lucas and Daniel Maldonado had willfully misrepresented ownership, entered fraudulent contracts, and attempted to mislead legitimate investors. She positioned Sierra as the wronged party, demanding damages from my father. Finally, Harlow stood. His calm presence filled the room. "This isn't just about real estate," he began, looking at the jury. "This is about trust. About a young woman whose inheritance, whose history was stolen by the very people who were supposed to protect her. It's about lies layered on lies until even the liars believed their own stories." He walked slowly past the jury box, his voice measured but powerful. Bethany Maldonado didn't choose this fight. It came to her doorstep, carried by moving trucks and betrayal. All she's asking for is the truth, and the law, nothing more, nothing less. When he finished, the courtroom was silent. Judge Whitmore gave the jury their instructions. 12 strangers stood, filed out, and disappeared behind the deliberation room door. And then we waited. The waiting room was thick with tension. Sierra's lawyers clustered in a corner, whispering strategy. Lucas paced like a trapped animal. Dad sat perfectly still, hands folded, staring at the floor like it might offer an escape hatch. Mom dabbed her eyes, murmuring prayers I'd heard 1,000 times growing up. I stood by the window, watching clouds drift over the courthouse lawn. Evelyn squeezed my shoulder. "You did everything right," she whispered. "I know," I said, and for once I believed it. 3 hours later, the bailiff announced, "Jury has reached a verdict." The courtroom filled again. Every creak of the benches, every shuffle of papers sounded amplified. My heart pounded in my ears. The jury filed in. Their faces were unreadable. The foreperson stood. The clerk read the verdict. In the matter of Maldonado versus Maldonado et al., on the claim of fraudulent conveyance, the jury finds in favor of the plaintiff, Bethany Maldonado. My breath caught. On the claim of breach of fiduciary duty, the jury finds in favor of the plaintiff. On the claim of conspiracy to commit fraud, the jury finds in favor of the plaintiff. Damages awarded. Full restoration of property and financial restitution in the amount of $1.4 million, plus legal costs. I closed my eyes, just for a second. The sound in the room blurred gasps, murmurs, the judge's gavel calling for order. I'd won, not just legally. Spiritually, emotionally. Against all odds, I had taken back what they stole. But then came the twist. As the clerk finished reading, Gideon Clark stood. Everyone turned. Sierra's legal team handed something to the judge, a single-page document. "Your Honor," Talbot said, "Sierra Capital has reached a separate settlement with Ms. Maldonado regarding the frozen loan. Ms. Maldonado has agreed to allow the property to remain in her name while Sierra recovers its funds directly from Daniel and Lucas Maldonado. In exchange, Sierra Capital relinquishes any claims to the house." The courtroom erupted. Dad's head snapped up. "You what?" Lucas looked at me like I'd set him on fire. The judge banged the gavel. "Order." I stood slowly. "I signed the settlement this morning. Sierra gets what they're owed from you, not me. The house stays mine, forever." Gideon's gaze met mine from the gallery. For the first time, he nodded not as a threat, but as a businessman acknowledging a worthy opponent. Lucas lunged to his feet. "You sold us out." I turned to him. No, Lucas, I stopped you from selling me out. Dad rose too, fury simmering beneath his composed exterior. You think this is over? You humiliated this family. I stared at him. No, Dad, you humiliated yourself. You just thought no one would ever dare to shine a light. Mom's sob echoed through the room, but this time I didn't flinch. When court adjourned, the press swarmed outside. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. I gave one short statement. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about standing up when everyone expects you to stay silent. Then I walked away, not through the back door, not hiding, but through the front steps into the afternoon sun. Lucas was somewhere behind me, yelling at Dad. Sierra's lawyers surrounded Gideon. Mom was crying, but none of that belonged to me anymore. Later that night, I returned to Grandma's house. For the first time in months, the porch light worked. I sat on the steps, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars appear one by one. The house was quiet. Still. Mine. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who believed family meant unconditional love, even when it hurt. She was gone now. In her place was someone who had walked through fire and found her voice on the other side. I whispered to the darkness, "We did it, Grandma." And for the first time, the silence felt like peace. The week after the verdict felt like waking up after a storm. The house was mine again, legally and beyond dispute, but the silence inside it carried the echoes of everything that had just happened. Each creak of the floorboards, each glance at the faded photographs on the walls, reminded me of what I'd fought for and what I'd lost along the way. People asked me if I felt triumphant. The truth? It wasn't the triumph I felt first. It was grief. Because winning meant acknowledging that my own parents and brother had chosen betrayal over love. That realization didn't vanish with the gavel's strike. It lingered, heavy and raw. A few days later, I got the call. Mom wanted to meet. Part of me wanted to ignore her, but another part, the part that still remembered her laugh, her lullabies, the way she used to braid my hair, needed closure. So I agreed. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically but in spirit. Her shoulders hunched, her voice quiet. She ordered tea but barely touched it. "Bethany," she said softly, "I don't know how to fix this." I stared at her across the table. "You can't." Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought I was protecting the family. I thought if I kept the peace, it would hold us together." "You didn't protect us," I said. "You protected the lie, and when you did that, you chose them over me." Her lip trembled. "I'm sorry." For a moment, I wanted to believe her, to reach across the table and let her words erase the years of silence, of betrayal. But apologies can't undo signatures on forged deeds or whispered schemes in the dark. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "But I can't trust you, not anymore." She nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. We sat in silence until she left. 2 days later, Dad showed up at the house. He didn't call ahead, he didn't knock timidly. He just stood on the porch, straight-backed, as if nothing had changed. "Bethany," he said when I opened the door, "this isn't the end. You think you've won, but you've torn this family apart." "No," I said, holding his gaze. "You tore it apart when you chose greed over your own daughter." His jaw tightened. For a moment I saw something flicker behind his eyes, not regret, not remorse, but fear. He was a man who had built his life on control, and now that control was gone. "You'll regret this," he muttered. I stepped closer. "No, I regret ever giving you the chance to think you could take what was mine." I closed the door before he could answer. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. Lucas came last. It was a week later. I found him sitting on the porch steps late at night, bottle in hand, eyes glazed. For a moment, he looked like the boy I used to sneak cookies with, the brother who once swore he'd protect me. When he saw me, he laughed bitterly. "Congrats, sis, you got what you wanted." I sat across from him, the distance between us more than just physical. "I wanted the truth." He shook his head. "You destroyed us." "No, Lucas, I exposed us. There's a difference." His laugh turned hollow. "Do you think the house will keep you warm at night? Do you think money will replace a family?" I swallowed. "No, but the family that destroys you isn't family, it's a cage." For a long time, we sat in silence. Then he stood, swaying slightly. "One day you'll see, you'll end up alone." I met his gaze steady. Better alone than betrayed. He walked into the night without looking back. After that, I stopped waiting for them to come around. The house was quiet, but slowly I began to fill it with new sounds. The laughter of friends visiting for dinner. The hum of my laptop as I built my design business back up. The scratch of my pen as I wrote down dreams I had once buried. Room by room, I restored the place. Not just with paint and furniture, but with pieces of myself I'd long forgotten. A framed photo of Grandma on the mantel. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table. A new lock on the front door, one only I had the key to. Every nail hammered, every brushstroke of color felt like reclaiming more than wood and plaster. I was reclaiming myself. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed across the sky, Evelyn joined me with 2 glasses of wine. "You did it," she said. I smiled faintly. "It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like survival." "That's the point," she said. "Survival is victory. You kept your voice. You kept your legacy. And you reminded them and yourself that you matter." I thought about that. For so long, I had measured my worth by their approval, by their affection withheld. But now I realized the truth. I didn't need their permission to exist. I didn't need their love to prove my value. I was enough. Months later, the trial faded from the headlines. Sierra moved on, chasing new deals. Lucas disappeared into obscurity. Dad fought his own battles in court. Mom stopped calling. And me, I built something new. I turned Grandma's house into a home again, not just for me, but for the life I wanted. Clients visited, drawn to the warmth of the space. Friends stayed over, filling the rooms with conversation and laughter. The silence that once haunted me became a choice, a comfort, a reminder of peace. One night, I stood in the living room, looking at the walls I had painted myself, the curtains I had hung, the furniture I had chosen. And I realized something profound. The house wasn't just mine because of a will or a verdict. It was mine because I had fought for it, because I had refused to be erased. If you ask me now what justice feels like, I won't tell you about courtrooms or verdicts. I'll tell you about freedom, about walking through your own front door without fear, about choosing who gets to sit at your table. Justice is not about revenge. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that others tried to take. And healing. Healing is when you finally realize you don't need them anymore. As the seasons turned, the house bloomed with life again. The garden grew wild just like Grandma loved it. The walls echoed with laughter, not arguments. And for the first time in years, when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone whole. Someone who had walked through betrayal, through fire, and found her voice waiting on the other side. I whispered to the night sky as stars scattered above me, "I'm free." And I believed it.